I think a big question, our main audience is younger people. A big question they're asking is how to buy a house. That's seen as like the next step, an aspirational step. Could you talk about a step-by-step guide? How would someone go about buying a house?
Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, the first thing is financing.
Yeah.
You can't buy a house without finance. Of course, if somebody has lots of money, then that's not an issue. But most people don't have enough money to pay a deposit, or they struggle, or they try and save enough to pay a deposit, which is normally 10%. So let's say you find a house for 200,000 to 250,000, depending on the area. Then you have to put a bid in. Usually through agents, you'd have to put an offer in. If your offer gets accepted, then that property is taken off the market, and the seller will then engage with you with the intention of purchasing that property. So concurrent with that, the person looking to buy would have to engage usually with a mortgage broker. A mortgage broker is somebody who just finds mortgages for you depending on your financial circumstances. Yeah. So there's plenty of them around. So you speak to the mortgage broker / advisor and say, look, I want to buy a house. I want to buy it for about 250. This is my income. They'll take whatever financial details from you, and then they will come back to you with which banks are offering mortgages for the amount you need and the percentage of the repayments and things like that. So that's something that doesn't have to happen before, but it must happen at least concurrently with the legal process of actually buying that property from the seller. So that's one aspect for sure. If you don't have finances, you can't proceed.
Yeah.
Which is usually the biggest hurdle.
Yes.
Yeah, of course it is. It's the biggest hurdle. So then once the legal process starts, the seller will have solicitors and the buyers will have solicitors. And that's crucial. Sometimes people think that, we don't need solicitors. I'd rather save $1.5 on legal fees. But you have to have solicitors on both sides. The reason being is that there's a lot of money changing hands. One of the reasons is, so the buyer solicitor has to act on behalf of the buyer, but also they will act on behalf of the bank.
Okay.
Right? So the reason being is that the buyer is obviously buying the house, but the bank is essentially paying for the house. And so the bank has a big interest in that house. They have a huge interest. And so they want to make sure that the money that they are giving for the purchase of that house is structurally sound, it's got no issues, all of those kind of things. So the bank will instruct you to do that legal due diligence on their behalf as well, right? So you got two parties, you're acting on behalf of both usually, right? So yeah, the buyer will have to have solicitors. The bank's not going to release the funds to the buyer because he can just, pocket it and, fly off to Australia and into the sunset. So we're regulated. We have to look after that money. The second thing is that as buyers, the buyer, let's say I act for the buyer himself or herself, we have to do legal due diligence. So that means we have to look at the land registry documents. We have to collate what you call searches. Searches are a pack of different documents that give you information about the property. So you have a local authority search that gathers all the information that the local authority has about that property and puts it in one document for you. So then what happens is when they engage with us, we'll write to the other side, have correspondence, we'll finalize a contract which binds the parties. We will raise inquiries and the seller solicitors answer those inquiries. At the same time, the buyer will get the mortgage ready. And then eventually there will be what you call an exchange of contract.
Memorandum of sales. Was that the last part that you're talking about, checking for environmental aspects of the houses?
No, it's actually the first part. So what happens is when you have an offer accepted via an agent usually, that agent, the document that they circulate with the buyer's details, the seller's details, the purchase price and all of the information, that's known as a memo of sale.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's the memo which sets out the terms of the sale that have been agreed initially.
Yeah. And who designs the memorandum sales? Is that your solicitor, the agents?
Yeah, the agents. That's that would be their job.
Fine.
All right. So they confirm to both parties' solicitors, we've agreed a sale. These are the terms. That's called a memo of sale.
Fine.
But it's not binding. That's the key thing. That's what you call subject to contract.
Yes.
So these are the terms agreed.
Okay.
Subject to finalizing the contracts.
Okay. So you have a memorandum of sales that's created by the agents.
Yeah.
And then the subject to contract, is that after when you do all the checks on the property?
Yeah.
To say, here are the issues or here are the questions. And once those questions have been resolved, then you create a contract?
It runs concurrently, to be honest. But the
Okay.
first thing you do is the seller solicitor
Yeah.
would draft the contract, send it to the buyer solicitor.
Yeah.
Okay. The seller solicitor will also give the land registry documents proving their client's ownership
Yes.
to the buyer solicitor.
Okay.
The buyer solicitor will then look at those. They will review the contract,
Yeah.
and then the parties can amend
Okay.
and agree that contract.
Right. Okay.
They'll look at the land registry documents. If they have any questions on that, then they will raise those with the seller solicitor. They will then apply for their searches, get the searches back, and they'll ask questions to the seller solicitor on the searches if there's anything. Yeah. So once the parties have agreed that contract,
Yeah.
both of them will sign, and then the solicitors between themselves will exchange contracts, meaning they will date the contract, which binds both parties then. Yeah.
Right. Have you ever seen examples where people have wanted to not have a solicitor, maybe wanted to save on it, and does that work positively or negatively?
Well, yeah, I mean, the thing is, in residential, people might suggest that they don't want to have a solicitor, but they'll learn very quickly that they have to because they're getting a mortgage and all of those kind of things. So I think with residential, people realize that they need a solicitor.
Yeah.
Commercial, sometimes you have the scenario where people are trying to cut corners and say, look, you just prepare the lease, because it's not just buying and selling. Commercial property is also leasing a property.
Yeah.
So you just prepare the lease, I'll sign it.
Fine.
Okay. And I mean, there's no law against that, but at the same time, it's risky for that person because sometimes they don't read anything, they don't know what they're signing, and there is a lot of risk involved in that.
So in terms of buying a residential property, for people who are listening now, you would say you need to get a mortgage broker, you need to get a buying solicitor if you're wanting so.
If you're buying a property.
If you're buying a property. Are these all the people you need involved then?
So, yeah, you need a mortgage broker to arrange your mortgage.
Yeah.
You need a solicitor to deal with your conveyancing, your transaction. Other than that, you might want to get a survey done, an independent.
Would you recommend it?
surveyor.
I was doing reading about it. Do you recommend having a surveying of the building?
Yes,
You do.
We do. I mean, we actually put it in our engagement letter to get a survey. Most people opt not to because they think it's a house, it's fine.
Yeah.
When
is the best time to do it? Before you buy the house? After?
Well, it's before, because once you bought it, it's too late, isn't it?
But then, correct. But then you could be getting a survey when you end up not getting the house.
Yeah. So look, there is a risk of investing some money in your due diligence,
as well as properties do go very quickly now.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you'd agree the sale first. So once you've agreed the sale with the seller, and the solicitors are now in correspondence with one another, you can just engage with a surveyor to carry out a home survey.
Can you agree the sale, but then you do the survey, and then you realize there's significant work, and then pull out? You can't do that.
Yeah. Nothing's
with no
binding.
cost.
Well, there's no binding
apart from the cost of getting the survey.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can pull out. I mean, you might have to pay your own solicitor's costs. So let's say just before the contract becomes binding, if you discover something which is a deal breaker, you can withdraw from the transaction. That's not a problem.
Okay.
But then you will probably have to pay some fees towards your solicitor's costs.
Okay. But
because
you
they'll
would
obviously
recommend that?
Yeah, I would recommend it. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.